the shtick here is that if someone drops a pop culture reference, the first person to correctly identify the pop culture reference gets some swag. So Jared, we haven't actually dropped a reference
Oh,
in a
okay.
while. So way to be on the ball there, Jared. You're gonna get some swag for that. So thanks, Joe, for inadvertently dropping a reference like we hoped you would.
Oh,
And thank
cool.
you.
Yeah.
All
Actually,
right.
most of my presentations have some type of either analogy or pop culture reference. I like to,
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
those to
That that
keep it fun and interesting. Yeah.
Welcome everybody to it's like our 24th episode of the Red Canary Office Hours. Keith is out getting some, I hope it's well-deserved time off. I don't think any of us know whether he's on vacation or traveling for business, but I hope he's getting some time off. And I want to welcome Joe Wise, the senior threat researcher from Proofpoint, that is going to join us today to talk about some of his research and some of the patterns that Proofpoint is seeing in their operations. Um, all right. So on the doc today, we're going to talk about a tactic called FileFix, and then we're going to talk about SVG files being used to deliver a particular RAT. So let's jump right in. Joe, tell us about FileFix and what's unique about this and why you wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, sure, Dave. And thanks again for having me. I'm happy to be on the webcast here. So, FileFix is just a different variation of ClickFix. So ClickFix is, or paste run, however you want to say it. But basically, it's instead of using the run command to paste the PowerShell script or scripts into there for a user, it uses File Explorer. So, it can use just a shortcut, or it can have a button be displayed to the user where it launches File Explorer versus the run dialog box. So it's just a slight tweak of ClickFix.
And
And yeah, so
do
before
you
we
have a
dive in,
picture later on of what that user experience looks like?
yes, I do.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Well, then I will hold my question until then.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, and before get into the FileFix details and things like that, just wanted to sprinkle onto a little context here as far as threat actor relationships. And the threat actors that are using ClickFix and FileFix recently. So Land Update 808 was the threat cluster that we recognized last week that was using the FileFix. So Land Update 808, nod to the researchers in Hawaii, the area code 808, aka Kongtuk. That's another name for them. But they're a web inject threat cluster that we track in our data. And that was the FileFix spotted that we spotted last week. We also track another web inject threat cluster. Basically, it's sock goalish or fake updates. It's the top right, TA2726, TA2727, and TA569. But what's unique to all of these different four elements on the slide is that they all have working relationship with TA582, which is another threat actor that we track. They're kind of like they're very busy. I kind of picture it as like the four little elements. You know that four corners monument where you can stick your hand in one state and your feet in the other. So it's Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah where they all can combine. So this
Yep.
is kind of like that, where TA582 has four different mechanisms or channels that they work with. Um, and so the top layer is the web inject threat clusters. And then they also do direct email campaigns on the lower right. And then on the left, you can see if we go back in time, 2022, 2023 timeframe, they worked with TA571 to distribute net support RAT and async RAT. So I just wanted to kind of explain some of the threat actor relationships there
Yeah.
before we get into the ClickFix slash FileFix.
So it's interesting to me to track those threat actor relations. Is TA582 like pulling together the different pieces of each of those other threat actors as a larger campaign, or is it providing a service to those other actors?
So I think it's more of a service. They're kind of like behind the scenes a little bit. They're collaborators or operators, if you will. Don't know the exact relationship that they have with each one, but it's fascinating from our prism, looking at the campaigns where they pop up in terms of our campaign visibility.
So would they be providing something like a primitive that someone like Land Update 808 would use, and that's sort of how you track the relationship?
Well, so for example, it would be like a web inject campaign that we would observe. So
Mhm.
legitimate website that's compromised, and it has the land update 808, aka Contuk recipe, if you will, like the first JavaScript profile that kicks off. But then later on in the attack chain, we'll see TA582, their fingerprints on it. So they're more of a kind of like a later stage in the attack chain.
Okay, got it.
And I have a slide here that kind of illustrates it a little bit as well.
Okay, before we get to that, do you know where they hail from, and do you guys maintain a mapping of your TA names to naming the sort of actors in like CrowdStrike or Microsoft naming conventions?
We don't have a direct, one-for-one parity with each vendor, each actor, but we do have an actor mapping of that. Yep.
Is that like on your website or something?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, we'll see if we can find that and drop a link to that in the chat here. All right, carry on.
Yeah, so this goes to your point. So this is illustration of an example campaign from Land Update 808, where we have a website. It's legitimate website, but it's compromised, and it has a one-liner to a JavaScript that runs and leads to another JavaScript that profiles the system. You can see the js.php, and then the components that it does to profile the system. It grabs the device, the IP, refer, the browser user agent string, and so forth. And after profiling the system, it basically decides the next stage. And I think maybe if you click one more, it will show, yeah, there we go. So it shows on the top right the information that it profiles, and then on the lower right, that's like the classic click fix that we've usually see with the Windows key and run, and then the pasting of that PowerShell command. So calling curl to that URL, and then that URL leads to TA582, their fingerprints, if you will, that profiles the system and determines a next stage payload. And then that system profile script from TA582, you might know, you might recognize it as mince loader. So the reason why it's called mince loader is because mince was the ending URI structure or pattern that was in early on when they were doing it a lot. But hence, it's changed a little bit. So mince loader is not necessarily that URI pattern.
Got it. Okay, and have you guys observed, have you done any analysis of what actually gets returned from the curl command? Does it vary based on the system profile?
Yeah, based on campaign to campaign, sometimes they switch it up. Like we'll do like a week-long campaign analysis and then check in periodically through the week. Sometimes they'll change that script. Sometimes they'll change the URL. But at the end of the day, it profiles the system to lead to either a stealer, interlock rat, Ghostweaver, which is a PowerShell backdoor. So then they can, change up the final payload, but it profiles the system.
Okay. And now, and on this slide, this looks like this is a traditional click fix attack, right? This isn't the
For
file
sure.
variant.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is your classic click fix attack. Yeah. Just so yeah, I wanted to show the relationship, the actor relationship, as well as the click fix. And then I think this next slide shows the FileFix variant that we saw last week, where it would be a similar campaign where it starts off with a legitimate site that's compromised, where they have the JavaScript calling, if you will. So it's 4r2e.js, and then that leads to another js.php, and it profiles the system. So it gathers that same information, the device, IP address, refer, that kind of thing. And then it leads to the next stage. So if you can click one more, and then one more click. So this is where it changes up. Instead of the Windows R to bring up the dialog box, it has a start verification. And what happens when you hit the start verification, it'll bring up a file explorer. And so if you click one more, we've got a screenshot of the file explorer window on the lower left. So the user will see the stuff on the left-hand side, a CAPTCHA to say, hey, complete this verification steps, and then start the verification, and then that brings up the file explorer. And then what's really running behind the scenes when you hit open or run, it issues a scheduled task called updater, and it calls another script from a try Cloudflare tunnel, and then that profiles the system. And the final payload for this campaign was interlock rat. So they switch up the like I mentioned, the final payload, but we've observed interlock rat since about early June this year from them.
So does that scheduled task require elevated privileges to actually succeed?
That's a great question. I don't think it does.
Okay. And I'm curious about the trycloudflare.com. I think I was reading some research about folks using attackers using Cloudflare Tunnel. It's not a technology I'm familiar with. Basically because it's a legitimate, I don't know, CDN, and so it's sort of hard to identify that as necessarily a malicious site. Is that what do you see around that?
Yeah, actually, thanks for bringing that up. We did a podcast, and I was tracking a lot of different threat clusters that are using Cloudflare. So it's like that whole, hey, I forgot my homework, can I copy yours syndrome with the threat actors, where one threat actor starts it, and then all of a sudden a ton of other threat actors are jumping on the bandwagon of Cloudflare. But it's a legitimate utility to spin up a temporary Cloudflare tunnel, and then they can use that temporarily in their attack chain. So we saw a lot of this deliver basically kind of like a cocktail of rats. So XWorm, Venom Rat, ZG Rat, in a separate threat cluster that we were tracking for months. And typically that attack chain started with like a Dropbox URL, and then it would lead to like a zipped URL file that led to SearchMS. So SearchMS, a legitimate Microsoft utility to display to the user like it's just a local search, but in fact is actually pointing to a script file on a try Cloudflare tunnel. So if the user clicks on that script, it'll reach out. It'll look like SearchMS, like a local search, but it'll actually run the script from a try Cloudflare tunnel, and then that downloads and runs a variety of different rats.
Right.
Yeah, so we saw that a lot actually this last probably a year and some change.
Interesting. Do you guys have any data on how or on whether this FileFix attack people fall for it more commonly than ClickFix?
Not yet, because we've just been seeing it in our data recently, like last week. So a little early on the comparison of a quick fix versus FileFix? But great question.
Interesting. Actually, I
And
would like to believe that if anytime I click on something on the web, it brings up a file explorer. I would like to believe that my alarms would be going off.
right, yep, yes,
I
same.
would hope that this isn't
And
something people fall for, but I'm guessing that they do.
yes, yeah, just different variations of it. And if you click on the next slide, and then we can go over the SVG attachments. So this one's kind of a fun one, even though it's Remcos RAT. So if people dislike or think that Remcos RAT or async RAT is boring, the emphasis is more on the attack chain here. So the attack chain starts off, if you click on the next slide here, with an SVG attachment. And what's cool about this attack chain is that it's been going on since early 2024. I've tracked this threat cluster, and they alternate between Remcos RAT and async RAT a lot of the times. And it's essentially the same, the attack chain, the nuts and bolts of it. So email with an SVG attachment, the vector graphics, image, and then it has an embedded URL in it. And typically it's a base64 image, and the URL is actually in the image, and the password is in the image. And that goes to a password protected compressed file, a zip file, a RAR file, whatever. And then the contents of that changes, and then it leads to whatever ending payload. But the nuts and bolts of that attack chain has been the same for a year and a half, which is kind of neat, just to keep tracking them over time. And another interesting thing, as we look at the email lure here, it's in Spanish, and they're typically always in Spanish, and they're kind of like a low and slow e-crime threat cluster. It's not huge volumes, but um, it's very consistent week over week. And they typically have the email lures around some type of court hearing. This week I was doing one. It was a speeding ticket violation, and it was like $340 or something like that if you translate the Colombian pesos to US dollars. But they typically will have an email lure that's some type of workplace breach, court hearing, or speeding ticket, something like that. And then if we click on the next slide, here's an example of the SVG in Spanish on the left-hand side, where you can see the password, and they alternate all these different passwords. So it's not just like a simple 1234 password. They have, all these different passwords per SVG attachment. Sometimes it's the same where they cluster them, but for the most part, each week they have like a different password to them. But
That's interesting. The
go
bulk
ahead.
of the ones you're seeing are in Spanish and
Hmm.
related to general financial topics. Um, I dropped a link in the chat earlier about the Ontinu research, and I think they are seeing as well that the campaign is targeting B2B service providers. They reiterate they're targeting folks that are handling corporate data or financial employment data. Right, those are always going to be powerful lures. Anytime you
Yeah.
get anything about a bonus, like was it Chris Malafa was saying that the ones he saw today were related to bonus payments and increases. Those things are always going to get people's eyeballs on them.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's interesting to hear that your research is showing it primarily in Spanish. Oh, it's
Yeah.
Chris is
And
agreeing that his hosts are all .es as well. That's interesting.
so thanks for bringing that up, because we do see other flavors of SVG attachments coming in. We see a ton of phishing with the SVG attachments. We also see, like other payloads, like Screen Connect. We've seen um, Strela Stealer. So a lot of different ending payloads, but this one was interesting because it's been so consistent with this set of this threat activity set, if you will, because it's very, always in Spanish, always a SVG, always a URL, always a password, and then always to a compressed file. And then this is where kind of like the Christmas package, if you will, or like what's in the box, is interesting. So if you click on the next screen, we can dive in to see. Um, yeah, so we've got a URL. They like this pixeldrain.com. They've also used, Bitbucket or Google Drive, done a ton of different URLs, but the pixel drain has been popular. And then that leads to that demanda_6.rar, which is password protected, and that contains, PNG, a couple JPEGs, and a JavaScript file. And if you click
So
on
that are those SVGs, are they legitimate image files? Like, do they render as an image file and just have
oh
the
yeah, yep.
embedded in them?
Yep. You can open it up and it's oh yeah, nice Jared. 7 references. What's in
Hey,
the
so
box?
so I got to take a brief pause here, Joe. I didn't share this with you, but
Hmm.
the shtick here is that if someone drops a pop culture reference, the first person to correctly identify the pop culture reference gets some swag. So, Jared, we haven't actually dropped a reference
Oh,
in a
okay.
while. So, way to be on the ball there, Jared. You're gonna get some swag for that. So, thanks, Joe, for inadvertently dropping a reference like we hoped you would.
Oh,
And thank
cool.
you.
Yeah.
All
Actually,
right.
most of my presentations have some type of either analogy or pop culture reference. I like to,
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
those to keep it fun and interesting. Yeah, cool.
That's awesome. All right, back to you.
Yeah.
Programming.
Okay, so if you go on to the next slide, we got the JavaScript, and it's on the left-hand side. It's a large JavaScript, very well commented there, but essentially the key components to that JavaScript is on the right, where we have it searches for that RAR file name, it extracts the contents using WinRAR, 7-zip, and other tools basically that it preloads or searches for on the system, and then it supplies the password A2025B. Then it looks for the JPEG files and then it extracts them and it renames them to DLL. Then it looks for PNG files and extracts it and then renames it to executable. Then it will sideload the DLL and install Remcos RAT. And uh, this has been pretty consistent with them a couple of campaigns where they have, the DLL side loading. But I thought it would be interesting to highlight this one in particular because what the JavaScript does, like on the fly, it could, renames the JPEGs to DLL, rename the PNG to executable. So that was kind of like a little nifty little trick.
Yeah, and so I would guess that that's a primary detection opportunity. Like
Yeah,
anytime. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. And along with like URL to SVG, or I'm sorry, SVG containing URL to, some type of password protected archive is a good one in terms of like stitching together an attack chain signature. That's a fun one to go hunt and to find these guys. And then if you go on to the next slide, it will show the configuration of Remcos RAT. And I like to, not just me, but our team likes to, uh, a good way to cluster threats is not only the attack chain and like the email lures and the C2s, but the configuration, specifically like tags or campaign IDs. So this is like going back with, you know, um, different payloads have tags or campaign IDs to them, like async ret is a way for the threat actor to organize or group their infections. And I track a couple other e-crime groups, TA558 and TA2541, and they use different malware tags or campaign tags. And so it's fun to track not only their C2s, but their tags. And in this case, it's Rodita, so it's Spanish there. And I found a reference to like some type of meteor. So it might be referencing that, or it might be some other thing. But it's interesting to like, especially we have, a year and a half of data with this attack chain, with the payload, as well as their tags that they've been using. So you can kind of do analysis going back in time to take a look at all these tags.
Well, interesting. Interesting. So Chris is dropping in the channel here that he's looking at some of the SVGs that his systems have caught today, and they're actually containing
Nice.
JavaScript code directly, not just URLs. Have you seen that in your research?
Yes, not just this threat cluster, but yeah, we've seen different flavors of SVG containing JavaScripts, files, and different things like that, ending in like I was mentioning earlier, we have like Screen Connect, Strela Stealer, RAT, a bunch of different like Xloader, different things like that. That is the ending payload.
Cool. Cool. Interesting.
And
Hey,
yeah, go
we're
ahead.
coming to the bottom of the hour here. I want to
Mhm.
wrap a couple things here. If you didn't catch it, I'll drop the link in the chat again. But the Ontinu research has a really nice section with mitigation recommendations as well as some detection recommendations for this type of attack. Um, and so if you're looking for actions you can take out of that, I would start there. Does Proofpoint put out any mitigation or detection guidance on that you could share?
Yeah, so we talk about like on our podcast and through our blogs and write-ups and through different mechanisms, like different ways you can detect and monitor, for example, like ET, the emergent threat signature is a great way to, if you have an attack chain that you're interested in hunting for this stuff, you can take a look at like different ET signatures that are along that attack chain route. And just like different oddities as far as like, scripts calling to try Cloudflare, going back to that FileFix and whatnot. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can do from a detection standpoint to look and hunt for like specifically like SVG files and scripts that are used in them, or URLs to container files, things like that.
My guess is that given Proofpoint's product portfolio, a lot of the guidance that you guys would have would be on the preventative side
Yes, for
and
sure.
filtering. Um, And I would say that the Ontinu perspective would be on the, when the detective or when the preventative controls didn't catch it, this is what you can look um, for I don't know if it's actually describing behavior or not, but it looks like it might be. I do want to circle back to the previous conversation around FileFix as our
Mhm.
last topic here. We had a question in the chat here about, is there a detection mechanism for FileFix, whether Explorer running commands or something would be a good detection opportunity. I will tell you, I think we're gonna have to take that question back to the mailbag, and we'll bring an answer back to that the next time we meet to see what our SOC team says is the best way to detect that. I have a feeling that there's a certain amount of Explorer running commands behavior that would be normal business, and I would be curious how chatty that detection would be. But we'll get an answer on that. We'll capture that and get back to you on that. Um, I love this. I love this reference to Ocean's 11. Oh, dang it! Sorry, guys. I just took that one.
That's hilarious. Yeah, but I'll start with that as far as like so what, or concluding the conversation. Again, thanks for having me on the call here. But with starting off the conversation, highlighting the threat actor relationships with the web inject threat clusters, with TA582, with all these different threat actors, each one essentially has a role, kind of like the Ocean's 11, where you got a team to carry out the heist. You got the planner, the mastermind person, the pickpocket person, and all the different roles essential to, you know, carry out an operation, kind of like the heist there. You know, we see the same as far as collaboration with threat actor groups in that regard. And
Yeah,
then
I would love at some point to hear if you guys have any sense of how closely these groups work together, how well they know each other, and what, like, be really interesting to know the human story
whether,
behind that if anybody does know it.
yeah, I'm sure that there's with anything like there's politics, there's besties, there's
Yeah.
probably some drama. Yeah. Um, And I'll just go from bottom to top with the so what stuff. So another trend that we are seeing is several helper scripts with attack chains. I didn't highlight it in this talk, but there's a group that I track, TA558, that has this crazy PowerShell script that contains 13 URLs to different elements to stitch together essentially a .NET assembly to load async wrap. But they have like Tron references in there, so you have to listen to Tron, the soundtrack to make it through the attack chain because it's so wonky. But helper scripts are definitely being used by a multitude of threat actors. And then the FileFix, obviously that's new, and we've seen it through Land Update 808, the web inject threat clusters, and we'll likely see other threat actors copy that like they did ClickFix, because ClickFix has been popular for a long time now, used by multiple threat actors and threat clusters. But yeah, thanks again for having me, Dave. Appreciate it.
Great having you, Joe. It's always great to talk to a fellow defender in the trenches. Really appreciate your insight. Thanks everyone for joining today, and we'll talk with you again next week.